Welcome to Chapter 6 of our Civil War unit, A House Divided. Henry Clay. He lived from 1777 until 1852. Henry Clay was born and raised in Hanover, Virginia. He moved to Lexington, Kentucky in 1797 to begin work as a lawyer. In 1803, he was elected to the Kentucky General Assembly. In 1811, he was elected to the United States House of Representatives and served as Speaker of the House, helping to pass the Missouri Compromise. He ran for president in 1824, 1832, and 1844, but failed all three times. He served as a Secretary of State in 1824 under John Quincy Adams. In 1831, he was elected to the Senate and helped to form the Whig Party. This would later become the modern-day Republican Party. He was one of the most influential politicians in the debate over the spread of slavery. Daniel Webster. He lived from 1782 until 1852. Born and raised in New Hampshire, he first worked as a constitutional lawyer and argued 223 cases in front of the Supreme Court. In 1813, he was elected to the House of Representatives and served for 10 years. In 1830, his speech, Reply to Hayne, was given. It is known as the most eloquent speech ever delivered in Congress. In 1845, he was elected to the Senate, representing Massachusetts this time, and served for 19 years. He also served as Secretary of State under Presidents William Henry Harrison, John Tyler, and Millard Fillmore. Like Clay, he was an influential member of the Whig Party during the debates over slavery before the Civil War. Also, if you were thinking it, no, he is not the Webster from Webster's Dictionary. John C. Calhoun. He lived from 1782 until 1850. He served as Secretary of War under James Monroe. He also served as Vice President for both John Quincy Adams and Andrew Jackson. While Vice President, Calhoun argued that the states had the right to nullify, meaning cancel out, laws passed by Congress, an unwritten form of checks and balances. This was not intended by the Founding Fathers and was potentially dangerous if enacted. In 1832, he was elected to the Senate and initially sided with the Whig Party. In 1833, he joined the Democrat Party because he strongly supported slavery, saying it was good for Africans because they were inferior. He was the third member of what became known as the Great Triumvirate, which represented the United States in the Senate, consisting of Henry Clay, who represented the western states and the territories, Daniel Webster, who represented the northern states, and Calhoun himself, who represented the South. The New Debate. In 1850, the United States consisted of 15 free states and 15 slave states. With California asking to join the Union as a free state, Southerners feared that if the free states had more power, they would ban slavery in all of the U.S. This is the opposite problem that happened back in the Missouri Compromise in 1820 when Missouri wanted to join as a slave state. There was more risk with new states being added from the territories acquired from Mexico, which had been free of slaves before the war. Southerners argued that slaves were property and they could move them to the territories just like Northerners could bring their property. Northerners argued that this was wrong because slaves were humans, not property. Compromise of 1850. Senators Henry Clay and Daniel Webster argued for a compromise that would bring a balance between slave states and free states in the new territories. While they did not want new slave states, they worried that without compromise, there would be war. On March 4, 1850, Senator John C. Calhoun, severely ill and nearing death, gave a speech in Congress from a stretcher, saying that if the North did not respect slavery, the South would secede, meaning leave the country, or start a war. A compromise was reached, adding California as a free state and separating the new territories into Utah and New Mexico without determining if there was going to be slavery yet. Below is a map of the United States during 1850 when the Compromise was passed. Pause the video for a second and take a look and analyze all the different parts of the map and what the different colors represent. Harriet Beecher Stowe. She lived from 1811 until 1896. She was born and raised in Connecticut with 12 other siblings. Her father was Lyman Beecher, a very influential pastor who helped found the American Temperance Society, whose purpose was to get rid of alcohol in American society, and was influential in what was known as the Second Great Awakening, a powerful religious movement in the United States. In 1836, she married Calvin Ellis Stowe, a strong abolitionist. They worked together on the Underground Railroad, housing and protecting runaway slaves on their escape journey. In 1850, Stowe began work on one of the most influential novels of the time, Uncle Tom's Cabin. Uncle Tom's Cabin. In 1850, the Fugitive Slave Law was passed by Congress, angering many abolitionists, including Harriet Beecher Stowe. In 1851, in response, her first installment on what would become Uncle Tom's Cabin was published in the National Era magazine. In 1852, the installments were collected in a book and were published. In less than a year, the book had sold 300,000 copies nationally. In 1862, Stowe met President Abraham Lincoln, to which he remarked, "So you are the little woman who wrote the book that started this great war." What he meant by that was partially a joke, but many people in the northern side were inspired by this to start fighting to end slavery, while Southerners were angry and started harboring resentment towards the North. Kansas-Nebraska Act. In 1854, Senator Stephen A. Douglas, no relation to Frederick Douglass, wanted to encourage people to settle the rest of the Louisiana Territory. All of the land was north of the Missouri Compromise line, making it free by default. Douglas feared that this would anger Southerners, so he proposed a solution. First, the land would be split up into Kansas and Nebraska, hence the name. Secondly, the Missouri Compromise would be repealed, and settlers could decide for themselves whether their new state would allow slavery or would be free. Douglas was indifferent to slavery and was more concerned with the people's right to vote. After much debate, the Kansas-Nebraska Act was passed. Below is a map of the United States after the Kansas-Nebraska Act was passed. If you want to, go back earlier in the video and compare this map to the map of the United States after the Compromise of 1850 was passed. It's only a 4 years difference, but you can see some subtle changes in that short period of time. Bleeding Kansas. While Nebraska was clearly going to become a free state, Southerners worried about the balance between free and slave states once again. Many moved to Kansas to influence the vote in favor of slavery. Anti-slavery Northerners responded by moving there too. Soon fighting broke out between Southerners and Northerners who had moved to Kansas. 200 settlers were killed in the battles before the U.S. Army came in and restored order. This became known as Bleeding Kansas and was the earliest battle over slavery even before the American Civil War. Summary. As new states were added, Congress had to pass new compromises in order to keep the balance between free states and slave states. Fighting broke out in the Kansas Territory over this issue, as Northerners and Southerners both hoped to start a new state. Make sure to have the summary, as well as the terms, copied into your notes before finishing this lesson.